Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast live on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter accounts, and later on our podcast channel. As usual, if you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening later on the podcast channel, please remember to like and follow the podcast. It's totally free to do. It just means with every new episode we upload, you'll get a notification to say it's ready to listen or download. I'm joined as usual on Mondays by Aaron Stokes, a Newcastle United editor, and it's becoming rather repetitive thing that we talk about Newcastle United victory. Not that we're complaining, of course, Aaron. Of course, we are talking about Newcastle beating Spurs 2-1 down in the capital in what was a very, very, very good performance from Eddie Howe's men. I'm going to go straight out and say that this may be, in fact, there's no maybe about it, this is the biggest win under Eddie Howe.
It's certainly up there. I don't know if I would say it's the biggest one, but it definitely ranks in the top three. I think it's a win that I certainly didn't see coming. I was saying pre-match yesterday that it felt like they're due a hammering, aren't they? And it's weird that they haven't got one. But look, another performance that showed that Newcastle United can mix it with anyone in this league. Their record so far this season against the Big Six has been almost perfect, and I just think yesterday was a huge milestone for them to show that actually, it isn't just a sort of a bluff from Newcastle. They are actually here, to give it a good go and actually to try and upset the apple cart this season.
Well, that's why for me it is, I think, the biggest win under Eddie Howe, because, Newcastle don't want to be one of those teams that are the pretenders. There is a real ambition to be an established top 10 side. And we've seen this season good performances against Liverpool, good performances against Manchester City, but them not really pick up what they deserved. And I feel there's only so many times you can sit there afterwards, sit here on this podcast and go, they were unlucky, but yes, it was against a top four side. And at some point, if you really are going to, crash our party, then you have to make sure that those performances get the points. And against Spurs, they did exactly that, because it would have been so frustrating to be sitting here once again saying they played so well, but they only managed to get a point because they couldn't hang on, or Spurs came back and won 3-2. But instead we're sitting here and saying, actually, Newcastle played well against the top side. They got the points they deserved, a massive win. And I think this really could be a huge stepping stone to what Newcastle can potentially achieve this season.
I think, that feeling in the dressing room afterwards must have been, just sheer elation. As you say, they've not only gone to the capital against a team who have been in fantastic form at home, they've actually gone there, they've held on, they've weathered that little late storm. And, just looking at that table last night, Newcastle United fourth in the Premier League, it's nosebleed territory. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think everyone to a man yesterday did their jobs again. I thought it would look like a very equal game. Do you know what I mean? And Newcastle United going to, as I've said, Tottenham, who, they've won 10 on the bounce at home, big superstar names. And actually, Newcastle United have matched them for a man. And yeah, look,
they were good value for those 3 points.
100%. And I think, we'll touch on it a bit more later in the podcast, but they weathered that very early storm where Son looked like he was in the mood. Kane was finding pockets easily. But to get 2 goals before half time, as Rob's saying there in the comments, just a fantastic team performance. And they did dominate for big swathes of the game.
Yeah, Rob Hall there saying awesome team performance, dominated Spurs for 3/4 of the game. We have some more players to come back from injury as well. Our team cost a lot less than others, on paper than others. I think the other important thing about yesterday is you go to Spurs, who had won their last 8 at home, and yes, it lost to Manchester United, but it was seen as maybe a little blip. But for Newcastle to go there against the side that, let's be honest, has hopes of winning the title. It might be unambitious hopes when you look at Manchester City and Arsenal, the way they're performing, but they do have hopes. For Newcastle to go there in front of the Sky cameras as well, I think the win will make a lot of people really stand up and take notice. And we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yesterday was a massive statement of intent of what this team under Eddie Howe really wants to get to, and it is the level that Spurs are at, and they've proved that they can really go up against the big boys and finally get 3 points.
Definitely. And look, Conte touched on it before the game. He said, Newcastle are a team that are very much on the up. Everybody is sort of bigging up Newcastle United as the team that in a couple of years are going to be in and around that top 6. They need to start talking about months, not years, because, should this team keep going in the manner that they are, and that's the challenge now, is to make sure that this isn't just a flash in the pan and they can continue this into the World Cup, beyond the World Cup. And Jamie Carragher, made a good point during commentary yesterday, and that was that they were very, very unlucky not to get more from Manchester City, who are blowing teams away. You could argue for the first half at Man United, they were in control. Very, very unlucky, as we know, at Liverpool. And yesterday, as you've said, they've gone on and actually got that statement win rather than just hanging on for a point. So all is well. I think Eddie Howe, the job he has done, and I know we say it every week, but he must be sitting there with Jason Tindall and they must be thinking, could anything really have gone better in this first year? They have not put a foot wrong, whether it's what they've done on the training pitch, their recruitment, their performances. He hasn't just got the players playing on the front foot. They're actually playing on the front foot and it's working. They don't look vulnerable at the back. Yes, there was a period yesterday where Spurs looked like they were going to come back into it, but it was never really hang on and hold on tight like it was at Man United. So, look, just a fantastic win. And as I say, the challenge now is just to continue it and keep it going.
Yeah, I think we saw for the first time real emotion from Eddie Howe, and he has shown glimpses of that before. We see him on the pitch and he gives the double fist pump, but there was just something when he was over in that corner applauding the fans who'd made the journey down, and he just couldn't stop smiling. He looked so happy. And I don't know about you, but that is the first time I think we've seen that level of emotion. He just let himself, he let his guard down and maybe just let himself get carried away with it. And why not?
It's funny because there was a moment at the end of last season, and I think it was against Arsenal in that famous game at St James's Park. And our colleague, Kieran Kelly, actually asked Howe about his celebration and said, we really rarely see you get that excited on the touchline. Did you just want to let yourself go? And you feel like for 90% of the time, he just wants to keep himself grounded. You heard in that press conference after yesterday saying, we can't get ahead of ourselves. I'm thinking about Villa next week. But yesterday when he was coming off that pitch, you saw him hugging Bruno, who obviously just had the baby in that brilliant story. You saw him hugging Shaw and Botman, and you just think he might not want to admit it to the public because it puts all this pressure and expectation on it, but he's clearly loving where this team's going and what he's doing with them.
Yeah, fantastic. And I go back to this, in my opinion, being the biggest win under Howe. I think that emotion that he showed there was maybe another reason why I've come to this conclusion, because it is such a big win. And people that watch this podcast and listen to it will know I'm usually quite
very grounded.
Grounded, is that the best way to describe it?
I get overexcited.
I didn't want to say pessimistic. I like
cynical.
To think I'm a realist.
Yeah.
But I'm going to afford myself a little bit of excitement because I just think it was a monumental 3 points. And even if, the form drops off towards the end of the World Cup, and I don't think it will, but if it does, I still think we'll look back on this moment against Spurs and it will still, I think it'll go down as one of the biggest results in that first stage of this new era.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, there's moments that we've already seen in the first year of how that stand out. We always go on about Arsenal. We always talk about big performances like that. And yesterday was one of those where it was really, every single man did their job and the fans were loving it in the way. And just a fantastic win. And as you've said, they've got a couple of games now at the World Cup. Howe's going to take them away to Saudi Arabia. They'll have a bit of a break. If they can get a win at Villa, if they can take points from Southampton and Chelsea and go into that break still in the top six, huge catalyst to then go on and push on. And it also brings into question, do they go out and spend in January to make sure that they stay there?
Well, we have asked for a couple of questions, or we asked for you guys to send in questions for us, and you guys have done. And a couple of them were based on what do we think will happen in January, and that goes to what you were saying there. And if they do indeed pick up a win against Villa and another one against Southampton, which is it's not against, it's not against, it's not, you can believe Newcastle will do that, then things will be interesting going into that January window. There are reports that if Newcastle are in a good position going into the window, that Newcastle may change their plans ever so slightly and go for it. Can you see that happening?
I think so. I think if Newcastle go into that break and they go into the January window and they're sat in the top six, I think that's, brilliant ammunition for PIF to actually say, look, there's funds available. Howe and Ashworth and Eales will have their targets already lined up. And we saw it obviously similar last January. They sort of had to spend, didn't they, because they wanted to stay in the league. This time, it isn't that necessity, but you look at that bench, it's still probably not where you want it to be. They probably need one or two more. As we've been saying for weeks, they probably needed another one or two in the summer. Just of real quality, just to make that group a little bit stronger. And I think if they can go into that, into that window in a strong position, it's an easy wing to take to the owners and say, just give us a little bit more money and we can really do something this season.
Finners1892 on Twitter wrote in to ask, who do Newcastle buy in January and what positions? We get asked this most weeks, and my view hasn't changed. It would be James Maddison. We saw over the weekend, again, a fantastic display for him as Leicester beat Wolves, and he would be my main priority in January.
Yeah, look, we spoke about it last week, I think, when we talked about January. I think Maddison, Diaby, the two names that are going to creep up. We know that they were very keen in the summer. You'd think with the position Newcastle could be in and the position Leicester are in, the position Leverkusen are in, they're two realistic targets if they can fork out the cash for it. I think you've got to be looking at another attacker. I think, look, Jacob Murphy's filled in the last couple of games well. Ryan Fraser has fits and spells, but I think they can just add one more bit of real quality, one or two in that attacking area. They've got a real attack to be feared. So those two are the obvious names, but I think as long as they get one attacker in, I think that's where the priority should be.
It's interesting as well, the homework that'll go into these new signings, because the players that came off the bench yesterday, they fitted straight into the players that they replaced in terms of they knew where they had to be, they knew what the game plan was, they knew they had to press and really get at Spurs, and it was a very seamless substitution on all accounts. Shelby coming on, Murphy coming on, Chris Wood coming on, and it's going to be that question, isn't it, in January? Do you go for someone of real quality who maybe lacks that full commitment and work ethic, or do you go for someone who has that work ethic and commitment in abundance, but maybe isn't as good? Because not everyone's going to be a Bruno where you have both of them, at the top level.
I think if, knowing Eddie Howe as we do, he wants players that are the right character. He's not going to, no matter how good they are on the ball, if they're not doing the graft off the ball, I don't think they're going to be in his plans. We've heard him say, as the pressure was sort of taking its toll in the summer when they weren't getting bodies over, he said they don't want to get players in quick. They need to make sure they're the right character, as I've touched on. So we saw yesterday Jacob Murphy off the bench sprinting to press, Chris Wood pressing from the front. They're going to need players that have got a lot of energy that'll do the dirty work defending as well as being good on the ball.
And talking about homework and the game approach yesterday, it was very clear that Eddie Howe had looked at Spurs' weakness, and their weakness, especially against Manchester United, was the fact that they couldn't handle the press. And we know Newcastle have adopted this in most games this season. We saw it against Everton. It worked well. It worked so well against Spurs. They absolutely forced Spurs. They forced Spurs, especially that Miggy goal, into making that mistake. Because they just closed them down. They hurried them, and Luis ended up kicking the ball. Longstaff wins it. Almiron does the rest, and we'll get onto that goal in a second in a bit more depth. But just Aaron on the meticulous preparation that Eddie Howe clearly puts into the way his team sets up.
That is Eddie Howe doing his homework, because he knows that Lloris is a fantastic stopper, but he's not very good with his feet. And there was a couple of times, it wasn't just for the goal, where the goalkeeper really did look like he was struggling with the sort of the ferocity of Newcastle. And I think we saw obviously with Eric Dyer's mistake where he passed out for a corner, just not giving Spurs an inch. And I think, we're going to talk about Longstaff more later and whether he had a good game or not, but he gives so much of that in the midfield. We saw for that Miggy goal, he did really well to go and press that full back, win the ball. And look, this is what Newcastle United are about now. Intensity is their identity. They're grafting, they're working. They're not giving anybody, whether it's Manchester City, whether it's Bournemouth, they're not giving them any time on the ball. And it made the cracks that were there for Spurs, it made them, very, very obvious. In that game yesterday.
And Spurs are a good side. They've got some great players, but the fact that Eddie Howe has gone into that dressing room and said to his players, you can match them, you can make them scared of what you guys can do, and then the players follow those instructions to a T, and they've gone out and got that win. I think when you take a step back, it does blow your mind a little bit that the takeover was only 12 months ago. Eddie Howe hasn't even been in the job 12 months. And this is where Newcastle United are at now. They're not going down to Spurs, who are going for the title and thinking, well, if we get a point, it'll be a bonus. They're going down there to win.
6 of that starting 11 yesterday were the same players that were in a relegation battle before Eddie Howe came in. You can talk about how much money they've spent, which is a valid point, but you've also got to admit the job he's done with Joelinton, with Almiron, with Shea, with Wilson, all these players that he has dragged to the next level is worth so much more than the players that they've bought off the pitch. So yeah, look, the confidence that he's instilled, we're gonna talk about Almiron in a second. He's given all these players such a boost of confidence. There was a brilliant moment at full time when the fans were in the corner clapping the away support, and Howe goes over Lascelles. He's still got his bib on, big handshake, big hug. The feeling that they've got in the dressing room, how he makes those players feel, even if they're not playing, it must just be such a good environment to work in.
I noticed that, and I noticed when Fraser came onto the pitch as well at full time, he was absolutely beaming, like he'd played a part on the pitch, and he hadn't.
Well, this is, I mean, I've probably mentioned this on the podcast before, but you ask Eddie Howe a question in these press conferences, and he never leaves a man out. You ask him about Shea, he talks about how good Shea is, but how good Botman is, how good Lascelles is. He never wants to put any players down. He never wants to leave them out. And I think, as you say, that the unity that they've got in this group now, whether they're playing or whether they're not, it's working wonders off the pitch.
Yeah, those scenes at the end, and then the Bruno and Wilson interview as well. It just shouts unity. It was a really emotional interview actually. The Bruno talking about his newborn son Matteo, who literally just been born a couple of days ago, and he's come down to play for Newcastle United as Bruno, despite the fact most people would probably stay back and help with the baby duties, but he's down there. And Wilson, giving him a little bit of a hug as he's talking about it, and then saying the win was for Bruno and Matteo. And I don't know, that I think probably pulled on so many heartstrings of so many fans.
Yeah, it does. And look, I think I've seen a lot of people talking about that Bruno interview, how brilliant it was. I still can't get over how good he is at English. I mean, he's better than some Geordies at talking English, and he's only been speaking at 10 months. I mean, there was another moment yesterday, Miggy scores, and Willock's reaction to him scoring. They're so happy for him. And I just think, have we ever seen a group this, together, this unified in the last 10 years? I really, really can't think of a time when there's ever been this sort of, and it's another thing, we always talk about, our favorite players, but this group of players, they're amazing at what they do. They're fantastically talented, but they're also grafters, and they're just a very, very good bunch. There's no character that you think is like, sort of out of place.
It's interesting. I mean, they're fighting for each other. They're fighting for the club. And I always think back to in the summer when Gary Neville made a point about Manchester United's recruitment, and he said the issue, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said basically the issue was over the last few years, they've bought players who think they're bigger than the club. And we're seeing it now, in my opinion, with the whole Ronaldo saga. Great player. But if the manager doesn't think he's good enough to be in that starting 11, then that is the manager's call. Yeah. And what you're seeing here at Newcastle is the players they've gone out and bought, not one of them is bigger than the club. And I think this, as soon as someone gets that ego boost and thinks they're bigger than the club, they'll be training within the 23s, or they'll be showing the door. Eddie Howe's not going to stand for that, because everyone, the club, the squad is better when it's unified, and that's how you'll get success. And you're seeing it, Fraser on the bench, Lascelles captain, not playing, but no one's kicking up a fuss. Yeah. And that comes from Eddie Howe's ethos, is that Newcastle United can achieve that. Well, as he said, there's no ceiling.
Yeah. And look, if you give Eddie Howe 100%, whether you're playing or not, he's going to, respond to that in the exact same way as we've touched on in the press conferences and in public. I think, they made a big deal about it in the summer about not breaking that wage structure. And that's another, sort of added reason as to why I think this group's so together. They'll have been offered a lot of players by, money grabbing agents in the summer and said, take this player and you can be this. This is no disrespect to him, but the likes of Lingard, who are coming in and they're wanting big money. And, we've seen how his start to Forest has gone, not very good. The way they've recruited, they've taken their time. They know exactly the type of player they want. It's just incredible what they've done. I can't praise Howe and the team and the players enough. I just think just a long way this continue.
Fingers crossed. And you mentioned it there, the amount of players who played who started the game against Spurs, who were here before the takeover, because this argument has come up, especially in the last week, about how much Newcastle United have spent, and came up with the argument when Steven Gerrard's been sacked by Aston Villa, that it's not that easy for teams kind of, mid-table looking at breaking that top 10 to do it unless you've got a load of money. But the reality is Newcastle actually, yes, have spent a lot of money, but not as much as people think. And secondly, as we've alluded to, a lot of the successes come because of the work Eddie Howe and his staff have done. The team are disciplined, they're fit, they know what they're meant to be doing, they're buying into the project. And as you mentioned, 6 of them were already here before the takeover. Let's list them: Share, Longstaff, Willock, Almiron, Wilson, Joe Linton. Off the bench comes Murphy and Shelvey. These players were here before the takeover.
Yep.
And what is also interesting, I think, as well, is that a lot of them know come the summer, come next January, they probably won't be here. I'm looking at the likes of Murphy. I'm looking at the likes of Fraser. But as we've alluded to, again, they're not kicking up a fuss. They want to be part of this journey for however long it may last for them.
Look, I think we know that the players are aware. When I spoke to Isaac Hayden when he left, he basically said, a couple of the players got together and said, we know this club's going in a direction and we might not be along for that journey. But look at Almiron. Look at John Joe Shelvey, players that you think had no chance of being part of this, new era Newcastle 2 or 3 seasons down the line. John Joe Shelvey's been a huge miss. Miggy Almiron at the minute is the most informed player in the league behind Haaland.
I knew it was always going to happen.
I can't believe we've got 21 minutes into this podcast and we haven't spoken about the fan club. I've heard, I might be wrong, but my sources say Gibbo's he's applied for a membership. Is that
no,
true?
I offered him an application. He said he wanted to wait until the end of the season, but I think he'll soon be knocking on my door to jump the waiting list.
I think he's going to come calling soon. I don't think you can deny Miggy much longer, even if you're a staunch ally of him. But yeah, look, all of these players know that, they might not be here for 3 or 4 years, but they're giving their all and they know that Howe can work wonders. And if they can just, find that groove, Longstaff is getting in this team week in, week out. They're going and beating Miggy, just an absolute fantastic turnaround. Joel, and
I just think the money argument, and I understand why people make it, but it annoys me because a lot of people focus solely on that. And I think it's disrespectful to Eddie Howe, to Jason Tinder, and to the players who were already here, and to the players who have arrived, actually, because you can look at Aston Villa as a point in case. You can throw money at a project, but unless you have the right staff in place and you have the players who've got the right character to buy into what you're trying to build at a club, the money doesn't matter.
Look, it's going to be mentioned, and I think it's a valid point in some respects. They've spent 200 million in 2 windows. It's a lot more than Newcastle used to spending, but they haven't actually gone out and spent 70, 80 million on an individual, have they? They haven't gone and done a Manchester United and bought an Anthony. They haven't gone out. They've actually bought really well for their money. Bruno, for 30 odd million, is going to rise significantly if he eventually goes. Botman is looking like an absolute seal at 35 million. And look, these are big transfer fees for young players. Fees that Newcastle would have never really paid in such a, continued sequence 2 or 3 years ago. But they've spent so well. They haven't wasted this money. They've put a lot of resources into it, but they're getting the returns. I mean, Trippier, 12 million? The recruitment's been so shrewd.
I just think it's a lazy argument when people also, I mean, like you say, it is a very valid point, but then you've got to also look at the work that happens on the training pitch, like, because you can go out and spend 32 million on Sven Botman, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a hit.
You can't go out and say Newcastle United are only in the top 4 because of the money they spent. Because as we've said yesterday, half that team is Eddie Howe, players that he was left from Steve Bruce. So it isn't I can understand why people bring up the 200 million. It's a large amount they've spent because they had to, but the credit should actually go to Howe for how he's transformed them players that he inherited.
100%. Let's talk about then some more action on the pitch yesterday. We'll dive straight into that Wilson goal. I mean, I'll be honest, when the replays started showing and then it was inevitably going to go to VAR, I did think they were going to overrule it.
Yeah, I was a bit on the fence. I was a bit concerned that they were going to have another decision go against them. I think on another day, another referee might have been inclined to give that, but I think it was the correct decision from Jared Gillett and VAR. I think Lloris has got to be stronger there. I think he looks for it. He goes down because he knows he's not getting that ball. So I think that it was a good decision. And look, the finish from Wilson doesn't even look up. He just knows where the goal is. But I think Lloris he hasn't been strong enough from that moment yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, right decision. But I just felt when you see Callum Wilson's arm kind of just move up, and I'm thinking, they're definitely going to overrule this. But thankfully, they didn't. And like you say, a great finish. Another goal for Callum Wilson. More talk about him pushing for the England squad. He's going to have to keep on scoring goals, though, isn't he?
Yeah, look, Gareth Southgate, he's not a risk taker. He likes this set of players he's got, and I think has Wilson maybe left it a bit too late. He hasn't made an England, he hasn't received an England cap since 2019. Part of me selfishly hopes he doesn't go. I would love for him to just have a couple of weeks of rest and be with Howe and the team. But on the other hand, it would be great to see a Newcastle number 9 at the World Cup. So if you ask me now whether he's going to go, I think no. But I think he's certainly in contention to be in the squad.
Yeah, I think he's got to still score a few more goals, and that will really then get him into the mind of Gareth Southgate. And we just saw yesterday again just how good he is in this system, just running the channels, winding up the opposition. He just takes Newcastle United to another level, and it's going to be so hard, I think, in January to find a striker that when Callum Wilson needs rest or does pick up another injury, that striker can come in like for like. Because what he does, few other strikers can do.
Yeah, we're still yet to see what Isak's really made of. Is he a number 9? Is he, more suited out in the wider as a 2? We don't really know, but it baffles me. Wilson's had so many injuries and he keeps coming back, and it's as if he hasn't had a single setback. He just always knows how to find that form. And look, it was quite a surprise to see he'd went 3 goals without a game before. 3 games without a goal before yesterday. But yeah, look, I think he's got a bit more work to do before he's in that England team.
That Almiron goal then, absolutely brilliant. I mean, yes, brilliant work from Sean Longstaff to knock the ball down. As we mentioned, great pressing from Newcastle to force Spurs into hurrying the play. But then Almiron to keep up as he's clearly fouled by Emerson Royal, I think it was. Most players would go down there, but he's only got one man. He shows so much strength, which is something you don't really link to Almiron. He shows so much strength to get him off, to keep him on his feet, and then get into the box, and it's a wonderful finish. A lot of people complaining or saying, if Lloris had stayed up, it wouldn't have gone in, but that doesn't matter. Almiron has to do what he has to do and get that shot on target. He does that. It's a goal. Was it 5 in a row now?
5. Is it 5 in a row? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 6 for the season. I mean, look, he's absolutely flying. And I think, the thing I noticed yesterday before the goal is that under Bruce, and even at the start under Howe, he used to pick up the ball, and as if he just used to run down these cul-de-sacs, head down, run, and I'll just drive forward. Now he's picking his head up, he's driving at players, and he's got a real purpose. He's the confidence he's showing. I mean, we've been waiting 3 years to see this type of player. This is the player we thought we were getting from Atlanta in 2019. This is the player Benitez thought he was getting. Just look, whatever Howe's doing to the likes of Jordan and him off the pitch, the confidence he must be giving them. I've never seen. We've been watching Miggy for 3 or 4 years now. I've never seen him play anything like this. Just the confidence he's showing is absolutely baffling.
He's fantastic, and he has defenses fearing, because whereas before you could literally probably shepherd him into the corner because you knew he was just going to run down that kind of wing and not really do anything. Here, his legs are going one way or the other way, and defenders just don't know what to do with him. He's just a totally different player, and it is an absolute delight to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was only a couple of weeks or months ago we were sat on this podcast and we were moaning. I think it might have even been the Bournemouth game that he wasn't using his right foot and he was getting in positions, but he doesn't have that killer instinct. And I think, now what we're seeing is he's actually found that, he's found that eye for goal and that killer pass that we've been waiting for so long. And the challenge is now that he needs to keep this going, actually.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens when both Isak and St. Maximin fit as well. One of them will likely have to not be in the side, but you can't see Miggy dropping out for them because he's Newcastle's top scorer. He's on absolutely fantastic form, and I do think it'll continue. We mentioned there Longstaff with the assist for Almiron's goal. I texted you at half time complaining about Sean Longstaff. And I was actually watching it with my family, and I spent most of the game complaining about Longstaff, and they told me in no uncertain terms where to go. I've since looked on social media, and there seems to be a lot of love for Sean Longstaff. He did have some good moments, but he also, again, was very pedestrian in the middle. And I think what I would like to see from him is just to be that little bit quicker. A lot of people are saying he's covered the most ground this season, I think, for Newcastle United. Fantastic. But he's also, I would imagine, up there with the player who's given the ball away the most, kind of, and he just needs to be that little more. I think if he just picks it up a little bit when he's got the ball and he's in possession, you will not hear me complain about him, because I think that's what he's missing.
I think the weakness that we see from him is that he's a bit sloppy in possession. He's a bit careless with his passing, and he needs just maybe a second too long. He just seems to dally a bit on it and dawdle. But look, I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast regularly knows that the work he does off the ball, I really, really like him. And I think if you look at, 2 or 3 of the biggest moments yesterday, he had a big part in them. He had a big part in that Miggy goal. He did really, really well for that Joe Linton handball that wasn't given, with that cross into the box. He just has these odd games.
But do you praise the basics? Because I get what you're saying. Like, he did have but how often does he do that? And do we praise him doing what you'd expect from professional football at that level?
I think when I got your text yesterday, I'll admit I didn't actually think he'd had too bad of a first half. I thought he was much better second half when I actually started to keep an eye on him.
He improved in the second half. I'm not debating that.
I don't want to praise him for doing the basics, but I just think this Newcastle United team are unbeaten in, what is it, 6 or 7. Sean Longstaff's played in the majority of them. The work he offers in that midfield is exactly what Eddie Howe wants. His intensity, he covers the most ground of anybody. The way he just hurries midfielders into making a pass, I just think he's an asset to this team, and he offers something different to what Willock does. Whereas Willock's much better on the ball, he's better in those attacking situations. I feel like Longstaff offers a bit more balance in that midfield.
We've got John Irving there, says, we still won, who cares? Can't judge anyone yesterday for the result. He's getting better, just praise him. So that is me well and truly told. Thanks for that, John. We'll dive into some of the comments that we've got then on social media. Let me just get them up here. So thank you very much for anyone that did shout in some questions. If you're watching live, get into the comments and we'll get through the questions there as well. We've got one person saying they noticed the bench depth is pretty light to compete all season for the top 4. What do you think we are missing to avoid so many injuries in players after only 1/3 of the season being played? Is it a change of staff, or is it like other plans off the pitch?
Look, I think we know that the club are trying to make changes behind the scenes. We know that they're trying to, drastically overhaul that sort of system that the old regime had in. I think that means, more fitness coaches. It means more nutritionists. We know that they've got a brand new state-of-the-art kitchen at the training ground, but I think, the club are still probably playing catch-up with other Premier League teams on that side of things, and the sports science side of things. So that could potentially be it. It's interesting though. They've had 3 games this week. We know about the injuries they've had. They've been very unlucky with them. But they've had 3 games this week, and I thought yesterday players didn't look like they were flagging. I think this group looks the fittest we've seen them in a long time. And I think that's the reason why Eddie Howe hasn't actually changed that much in these 3 games. He's kept the team pretty much the same. So yeah, look, I think they'll use this break over the winter to regroup. I think they'll be training, but not very hard. I don't think Howe will want them anymore.
Well, that's probably the benefit of this break of the World Cup. You can say to the players, look, we've only got 3-4 games left. Let's give it all. Then you're going to have 2-3 weeks off to recuperate. You're going to go off to Saudi Arabia, warm weather camp. You'll enjoy that. will put you through your paces, but not as much. Come back because it's Leeds. Is it the first game after the break? I'm not mistaken. The one who's the Boxing Day one? Leeds is New Year's, isn't it?
Leicester
Boxing Day. So you can come back refreshed and pick off where the break ended. And yeah, like you say, you looked at the players yesterday, and everyone, they just look so fit.
Yeah,
that's one of the key differences. And we know sources had a go at Steve Bruce and the way the training was under Bruce, and claims that they weren't fit enough. I mean, Callum Wilson came out and said it, didn't he? The preseason was not very good, and straight away after that West Ham game, they realised how far behind other teams they were. Whereas here, you look at them, it's like Eddie Howe's been telling them to run around the track all day, and that their stamina is just unbelievable and such a big asset to the team.
Yeah, as I've said, they've had a big chunk of games, testing games, and I thought, after watching the second half at Old Trafford, I thought, they looked like some of them were in need of a rest, and somehow they've just managed to pull through 2 further games in this week without really, looking like it. I thought Bruno looked a bit tired yesterday, but that's probably because he's had no sleep for the last 48 hours. But I thought on the whole, the group looked, in really, really good physical shape.
Back to action on the pitch then, a couple of penalty shouts that didn't go Newcastle United's way. You had Joe Linton in the first half, got tangled up. Wasn't a penalty for me.
That was a penalty.
No. Second one though, the handball.
Yeah, I think on another day that's given. I think you saw the one from Dan Burn yesterday where his arm was in that unnatural position. I think on another day, Emerson gets penalised for that, and it's a penalty.
But Newcastle won, so does it really matter?
Doesn't matter at all.
No, it's it.
Let's move on.
Thankfully. Don't want another rant from me on VAR. Harry Kane scored. It was probably the one time the defence switched off. Got the better of Kieran Trippier. A little bit too easy for my liking. It's going to happen though, isn't it?
Yeah, look at I thought the defence as a whole was good, as there have been all week, as there has been all month, really. But I thought, that was just the one moment it switched off. But look, Kane takes those chances in his sleep, doesn't he? So he got the better of Trippier, and thankfully, it didn't spur this big Spurs comeback, if you'll pardon me.
I want to talk about time wasting.
Okay.
I saw a lot of criticism on social media about the commentators acting like Newcastle were the first team to invent time wasting. I also though feel Newcastle were time wasting a little bit. Nick Pope probably deservedly got booked for time wasting. And it's one of those things, isn't it, where I think, you're going to get complaints when the board goes up. But at the end of the day, I did feel quite early on Newcastle were playing for the clock in many instances. So if they're going to do that, I guess the point is we're going to have to accept that the board's going to go up with more minutes than maybe Newcastle fans are comfortable with.
If I'm honest, I thought they were time wasting a lot more at Liverpool than they were yesterday. I think they were yesterday, but I don't think it was on the scale of that Anfield defeat. But this is what we want from them. We want for them to be playing for time. Trippier will be drilling that into them. These experienced players will be drilling it into them. That just got to keep it calm. Miggy, we've seen him. He wants to take throw instead quickly all the time. Trippier's just got to tell him no, just settle down. But we spoke about it last week after Man United, where the players need to be showing this more ruthless side, and that's what they need to be doing. And I thought they actually managed the game really well yesterday. There wasn't a period where Spurs had built up all this momentum and they were knocking on the door. I thought Newcastle, sort of broke the game up well. And that's what they're going to need to do in the future if they're going to keep taking points off the big sides.
It's the little things, isn't it? Like just walking back 10, 15 yards from the touchline when you see your number go. Little things like that. I mean, Spurs are getting very, very angry at that. But it's those little things that the top teams do without even thinking about. And it is those little things that will give you the advantage.
100%. And look, if Spurs had been at St James's Park and they were 2-1 up with 10 minutes to go, I bet you they would be time wasting as well. As Graham says there, it's a part and parcel of the game. And I think Newcastle, Howe will be drilling it into them that, the game management needs to be spot on when they're playing these top teams.
And Jonathan Casely says we need to be more clever with the time wasting. We are too obvious and get punished for it. But hey, it worked in the end, didn't it? And you talk about their breaking up play. And one man I feel definitely deserves a shout was Chris Wood. Comes off the bench. I thought it was one of his better cameo performances. He only had I think it was 7 minutes that he had on the pitch. He drew a really good foul. He was away, to be fair, but that foul breaks up the play. He was winning headers. He was just doing what he was brought on to do. And yes, it would be lovely to see him get a goal. Will he get you 20 goals a season? No, he won't. But for the 5, 6, 7 minutes he's on the pitch, if he can do that and break up their position, stop them from getting forward, then hey, get the flags out from him. Because yesterday, I think he came on that pitch and did exactly what the instruction was. Stop Spurs from going forward.
There was a moment yesterday as well when he came on, and Darren Lee's just alluded to it in the comments here, that I can't remember who it was, who played the ball through on goal, and Wood was actually away. He'd broken the offside trap, and the referees decided not to give the advantage, and he pulled it back. So it's a shame, because as Darren says there, it would have been good to see him get actually have a little chance to get on the score sheet and give him a confidence. But look, I thought he did well when he came on. He did the job he had to. Murphy as well, really, really good graft when he came on, pressed from the front whenever Spurs' fullbacks had the ball.
It's interesting because we mentioned then, Alan Shearer mentioned on Match of the Day that everyone came off the bench and knew exactly what they were doing. I would like to know how Eddie Howe picks his side, like during the week, because we have the same engine. We have, one side's in blue bibs and the other side's in red, and it's the blue bibs that are going to start on Saturday. But I wonder if he doesn't give any inkling to the likes of Murphy, to the likes of Fraser maybe, and he just says, let's everyone play this training game as if you were all going to start, and then it's not till Saturday midday when the team news drops that they know who's actually starting.
Well, he certainly keeps us guessing as journalists, so it wouldn't surprise me if he did it the players as well. But look, I think, I didn't know who was going to start yesterday. I think you can make an argument that Fraser or Willock's going to start. Fraser or Murphy. Willock and Longstaff are going to be battling out for this spot in the middle as well. There's competition for places now, and I think, as we touched on earlier, these fringe players that might not have a long-term future know that actually they've got a spell of a couple of minutes in this team.
And the decisions that are being made, it's not like it's only going to come if people are out of form, and actually everyone that is playing, even coming off the bench, is actually doing a decent enough job. And that's fantastic. I mean, Joe Linton again yesterday, he was. Bear in mind, he wasn't really playing in that middle, was he? He was kind of over on the left. He was there was a great moment when he runs 30, 40 yards
back to tackle, yeah.
And he gets a foot in, and you just think, what an absolute beast! What a warrior! He's been, again, just unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the work he gives in that middle, it's sort of, Bruno is a grafter, but it allows him just it's a weird comparison to make, but remember when it used to be Shelvey and Hayden in the middle, and Shelvey used to just go forward and spring all these passes, and Hayden was like the water boy. He used to do all the graft. It sort of feels a bit like that, because we know that Joelton, when he gets forward, doesn't, he sort of forgets how to play football sometimes. The balance he gives that team when Bruno's going forward and working with Miggy, they've got a real good combination there. And I think the work he puts in, him and Longstaff, is why, we see he's one of the first names on the team sheet now.
He's got such an engine on him, hasn't he? Like it's just been rather remarkable, the turnaround. And we're not going to talk about it again because we've talked about it many, many times. But yeah, I thought yesterday he had another good game and just gets about the pitch, that physicality. So it's going to be interesting going forward to see what happens there. Shelvey, as you mentioned there, he came off the bench, didn't he? First time we've seen him in action in quite a while. And again, just seemed to, slip right in.
Yeah, look, we've been sort of crying out for Shelvey to come back, I think, in recent weeks. And I think he slotted in nicely. I think, Eddie Howe said it. He was only going to use him in case of emergencies. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see him have another couple of weeks on the bench just to regain his fitness. I don't think Howe's going to be in any rush to start him before this World Cup unless he really has to, because, they won't want a setback of that injury that's kept him out since August. So, but look, good to see him back. As I've said, we've missed him. And I thought he did well when he came on.
And just one thing, actually, I did want to mention about Joe Linton, the person I was sat with for the Everton game. He said he felt Joe Linton doesn't really have a position. And what does the future hold for him? I know you have previously, Aaron, shared the same view on Joe Linton, but for me, you play him either as part of that midfield three, and you just let him roam because he's got such an engine. He can get up and down. More often than not, he's going to be there to get a foot, and he's going to be there to cover. And I don't think you need to pigeonhole him as this, defensive midfielder, this centre midfielder, this left wing attacker. I think I think he will always be in that side until they buy someone of a Bruno's level, but I don't think that's going to be as easy as that. So I think, given the levels he's performed at, and I'll say it again on record, for me, he's been the most consistent performer this season. It's going to take something for them to buy a player that improves and goes up a level. I think he's going to be in that midfield, or at least in that team, probably for the next year, no matter what.
Yeah, look, start of the season, I wasn't sure whether he was going to make that position his own, but I think he has. I think the response is, to me, I think he's another one who's clearly listening to this podcast and trying to prove we're wrong. I think he's been brilliant. He's really made that position his own. We saw last season, I think towards back in the season against Norwich, he went and played an attack. He did really well. He scored a couple of goals. Yesterday, he started out on that left. It's gone from, whenever we used to see Jolton start an attack on a team sheet, we used to think, oh, here we go again. He's put him in midfield. Actually, I think he's learning how to play in the attack when he needs to, as well as playing in the midfield. And I think when he does play in that attack, he offers, we always used to say about Max, he used to offer loads going forward, but not enough going back. Jolton's like a nice mix because he does actually drop back. We saw yesterday that graph for that 30-yard tackle he made. But I would agree. I think he's been the most consistent over the last year under Howe.
And we've got Graham Morton there saying, don't underestimate Willock. His movement and intelligence allows Bruno the space. Yeah, and again, we've seen in recent weeks Willock step up to the plate and show why Newcastle paid so much money for him. Bruno, again, I don't think we need to talk really much more about Bruno. We'd just be going over old ground. He just seems to be getting better and better at picking out those passes, good work ethic. He's just been brilliant. We did have some comments there as well saying Dan Burn needs to be on the plane for the World Cup squad. I don't think that's going to happen. I thought he had a good game yesterday. Again, I've been a little bit worried about how he's going to handle playing against the top sides. But I thought he had a decent enough game there. There was one or two opportunities for Spurs where he was caught out for pace, but on a whole, didn't really put a foot wrong.
Look, I mean, I've got to hold my hands up. We spent a lot of the podcast last Monday after the Man United game saying that he was the weak link and he'd been torn apart by Anthony, and we didn't know whether he would be starting against Everton. But the last two performances, he's really came through it. I thought he was very assured on Wednesday. And I thought yesterday he's very good. He offers so much going forward as well. Those set pieces where him or Botman are going to get on the end of it. So yeah, I thought he was another good one yesterday. I thought they all played well yesterday, but I mean, we'll go back to this thing. Matt Targett, he came in January, he played 16 games on the bounce, didn't put a foot wrong, and he's struggling to get back in this team. The competition for places now is just incredible.
Should we have a bit of a love-in for Sven Botman? Because there's a lot of people in the comments wanting to maybe even set up a Sven Botman fan club. We're going to have too many fan clubs.
I know, but I think if anybody deserves it, it's Sven Botman. I cannot believe that this man is 22 years old. He looks like he's been playing football for 22 years. He is absolutely incredible. The way he reads the game.
I think the big question is, and you apply this to Bruno as well, where on earth are the scouts from Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal? Yeah. Where are they? I mean, we've benefited from it, Newcastle, thankfully, but...
Yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, when you think it was only really Newcastle and AC Milan in the summer that wanted him. I mean, he was doing this for Lille. We watched him last season. I watched him last season playing against Chelsea, and I thought he had a really good game. I was surprised that Newcastle was sort of allowed to go alone for him. But the way he's came into this team straight away and slotted in at 22 is just fantastic. I thought he was brilliant yesterday, amazing against Manchester United, and he played well against Everton. I think the back four as a whole are just absolutely flourishing right now.
Some of the comments here on Botman. David Ellison says Botman looks the complete centre half, makes it look so easy. And there were a few other comments at the top end there. So thank you very much for getting them in. What we'll do now is we'll hear from Eddie Howe. This is what he had to say after the 2-1 win against Spurs.
Some of your emotions after that, please. Real pride in the players, in the whole football club, really. The scenes at the end were brilliant to be a part of. I have to compliment the group on everything they gave today. I thought it was a really, really good performance. Probably the best since I've been here. And I thought we deserved it. I thought it was a tough game. Tottenham are a very good team, but I thought we played very well.
I mean, did you see it coming? You've had 2 games this week. You spoke midweek about would have the energy. Did you see that performance coming?
Well, I hoped it was coming. I don't think you can ever sit here and say I knew it was coming. We decided to go with the same team today. performances really, I think, have dictated that. We didn't want to change too much. The rhythm of the team's been really good. So we had a battle between fresh legs and the continuity and the team playing in a very functional way. And I think it worked that we just went with the same rhythm, and the players emptied the tanks for us. They gave everything. I thought technically it was a very good performance today. I thought we did very well with the ball.
There we have it. The views of Eddie Howe, and he just sounds so grounded forward, talking about the way he was in the moments after the game. He gets in front of the press, and he's just so grounded, and it's quite enjoyable to hear him talk as well. He's not getting ahead of himself. I think he gives, sensible answers. What did you make of what he had to say there?
Yeah, look, it's just typical Eddie. Very grounded. He doesn't want to look ahead, past Villa on Saturday. What I'm always struck by is how sort of technical his answers are as well. He's always very detailed. He's always got a lot of things to say about each topic. It's never just sort of short and simple answers or we got beat, we're going to roll the sleeves up and go again next week. It's always, there's very, very concise actions. And I think it's interesting there that he talked about the team not wanting to change it. I think, we said last week that he doesn't like to change winning teams so much. And I think, despite players knocking on the door, I think wouldn't be surprised, especially after a 6-day break, to see them go and change against Villa on Saturday.
John Steele says Eddie Howe deserves a huge amount of credit for what we've achieved. I thought he should have made changes to the start lineup. I was wrong. 7 points from these 3 games is unreal. He has to be manager of the month and Miggy player of the month. And actually, we did sit here last week and say you want 1 win from these 2 games, and we've got 2 wins. It is fantastic, and I guess that's where we're going to end this episode on. Newcastle United sitting in the top 4, 21 points. Top of the form table as well. Just how far can this Newcastle United side go?
Well, look, if Eddie's listening, then I've got to apologise because he won't like me saying this because he doesn't want to put targets and labels on it. But I think they've got to be aiming for European football now. And at the start of the season, I thought they'd come up short, and I thought 8th to 10th was a good finish. And look, it still might be, but the way they've started the season with injuries, without their best players, to be in the top 4 at this stage of the season. The last time they were in the top 4 at this stage after 12 games was the Pardew finishing 5th season. I think now top 7's a real possibility. And I'm starting to come around to the fact they could do it.
It is. I think it is.
You need to bring me back down. You need to be the realist in the
What I was going to say there, you listen to Callum Wilson after the game. He was asked a similar question, what can Newcastle United achieve this season? And he just said, got to keep the feet on the ground. And that seems to... For all they're all on the same page on the pitch, they're all on the same page off it as well. The message seems to be absolutely consistent, game by game. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, and we'll see what happens at the end of the season.
Yeah, and look, it's smart. We will talk about targets. Till we're blue in the face. Fans will do it. For Eddie Howe, it's simple. He doesn't want to put any outside pressure on it. He doesn't want to, give false hope. He doesn't want to set himself up to fail, set the team up to fail, which is a very, very smart thing. It would be so easy to say, look, we think we can do it. And he's sticking to his guns and saying that he doesn't want to publicly talk about where they can finish, which is smart because you've got idiots like me now saying that they can finish in Europe. So,
well, it's just refreshing to talk about Newcastle United in a healthy position in the league. I mean, this time last season they were bottom.
One thing I think to say is I think they're going to stay up. I think they're
sure
safe from relegation. I think they're safe.
Well, this has been the Everything is Black and White podcast. Thanks to you guys tuning in on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is my last show for 3 weeks.
Yep. Before the big day.
I'm off to get married, so I'll not be on this podcast for 3 weeks' time. We're going to have some guests coming on, though. Aaron's going to take on hosting duties. So keep an eye on social media to see just who Aaron will be questioning. That sounds a bit... meant to sound happier than that, doesn't it? But yes. But thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Thanks from me and Aaron. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep up to date with all the latest Newcastle United news, including all the latest from this fantastic win over Spurs.